Hello and welcome to this episode of the Social CMO Show. I'm your host, the Social Data Girl Shilpi Agarwal, and my guest today is the Senior Social Media Manager at Pandora. Please welcome Aaron Morgan. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you, Aaron. How are you?
Doing well. Glad this is working.
I know we had a little hiccup. Sorry, we are a little late. So from the time we committed, but we are here, so it's all good now.
Good.
So, Aaron, tell us. Let's start by telling us a little bit about your role at Pandora.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I started at Pandora actually 7 years ago. I started in our listener support team, and at Pandora we have a team of folks who answer every single email that comes into Pandora. And so early on at Pandora, that was kind of our only form of marketing, really. Our founder, Tim Westergren, would send an email out to everyone when they signed up for Pandora, and everyone was encouraged to respond to that email. So we responded to 100% of the emails that came into us, and that was kind of the basis of our relationship with listeners at Pandora. So a couple years in, we started our first Twitter channel, and we started a Facebook account, a MySpace account. I believe there was even a Friendster involved. And at that time, we really thought of the social networks as being an extension of that one-on-one relationship with listeners. So through the years, obviously, the role has grown and evolved as social media has grown and as Pandora has grown, and it's been a very exciting experience, and we're continuing to evolve even at a quicker pace now, I believe, than we did back then.
Awesome. So this is interesting. You talk about the listener role. So was it only the people who belong to the listener support group were in charge of responding to all the emails, or everybody in the team, marketing team, would take turns to respond to them? How did that work?
Well, in those early days at Pandora, we actually didn't have a marketing team yet. So the listener support group was about 5 people, which also had some crossover with our IT group as well as our music curation group. So it was sort of a multifaceted effort. I wouldn't say that everyone in the company was responsible for answering emails, but there were times when we would call on other folks for more help when there was a big onslaught of email.
Nice. So tell us, social media has evolved so much. I'm sure so has Pandora's social media strategy evolved over the years with the changing landscape of social media. What all social media channels is Pandora leveraging today?
Currently, we're on basically every channel that we can be on. We think now we've taken the approach that it's really important to try everything and see what works for us. Especially important for us that we're connecting with listeners in places where they are already there, and definitely in places where they're used to connecting with music and with artists. So we've seen just even in the past few months, Snapchat become a really important channel for us, where a year ago we weren't even on Snapchat. And then, of course, our main channels still are Facebook, Twitter. We do have a Google Plus page. Instagram is really important for us. So we're on pretty much every channel, and they're all very important for us.
So it's interesting that you say that, because we always say that you should only dive into the channels that work for you, but unless you try all of them, you wouldn't know which one is working. And like you mentioned that you are on, like, Pandora is on all social media channels, and then you're trying to figure out which one's working better, one versus the other. So I mean, it's so much of an effort to get onto one channel, and to even make it remotely work for the brand is such a huge effort. How does the team manage? Is it allocation by profile, like one social media profile is given to one person, or how do you divide amongst the team?
We have a team now. We have a team of 5 people. That's actually relatively new. For many years, it was a solo effort by me, and then we added our first associate a couple years ago, and now we have a director, 2 associates, and some interns who help us out. So to get onto each of these channels, make sure we're getting a relevant message across on each of those channels. It's a bit of a divide and conquer within our team, but it's looking at, you know, who has kind of the best aptitude for which channel. So some folks are a little more visually, have some visual editing skills. Other folks are really great at copy. And so obviously the copy folks kind of levitate toward Twitter, lean towards Twitter. The visual folks more towards Instagram and Pinterest. So it really depends on, you know, making sure everyone's skills are getting across in the best place.
That's interesting. So very true. I mean, it's all about visual content these days, but not everyone is visually savvy or inclined to do their best in that. So some are great writers and copywriting comes naturally to them. Mm-hmm. Whereas for some people, design and visual communication is their asset. So now when you communicate, is it the same message but in different formats? How do you decide on your content strategy for all the channels?
So we have kind of an overarching strategy of, you know, that we want to grow users for Pandora, that we want to showcase our relevance across each of these channels, our relationships to artists, and all of these channels also are really listener first. So we have other places where we have B2B messages for our advertisers, where we have messages for potential employees. These don't always belong on the channels that we manage. We're definitely focused on our listener first message. So we look at kind of what is the Pandora that we want to be? What do we want to be perceived as? And then kind of drill that down into some simpler components that we can, you know, represent ourselves across each channel in the right way. So
give us an example. What does Pandora want to be seen as, and how do you translate that into the marketing strategy?
So I think like the biggest piece for us is that we really want to foster a music community amongst our listeners and our followers. Yeah. So I think we're always attuned to what's going on in the music industry, what's going on with other music services, and what people are really looking for when they're listening to music as sort of the added component to music. So for us, I think a little bit of the area that we fit in, we're a brand that is based in Oakland, California. We've been in Oakland for our entire life. There are other offices across the US and in Australia and New Zealand, but Oakland's our home. So I think there's a certain amount of the look and feel and how we feel about being in Oakland that kind of contributes to our visual aesthetic and some of the way that we think about how we talk. So it's not that we're posting things about Oakland and Oakland artists all the time, but we are thinking about how we let that aspect of our personality seep in. So little things like that we grab onto and then try to kind of represent through each of our pieces of content.
So now your biggest customer base is artists, or is it listeners? And who do you like pay more attention to?
I think our channels are primarily geared to listeners, but we do a lot of programs with artists. So it's really important that we, you know, create a great place for the listeners and the artists to connect. So I wouldn't say that either one is, obviously they're both equally important. There would be no listeners without the music. There would be no music without the listeners. So they're equally important, but we do think of the people that we're talking to on our channels as being listeners. And we do actually have a separate channel called Pandora Amp on our Twitter that is specifically geared towards artist marketing. And so on that channel, it's a little more B2B, but it's a different kind of B2B because we're talking to artists and their managers and labels.
So we were talking about the editorial calendar a little while back. So what kind of posts do you usually Pandora posts on social media? Is it like, hey, check out this new artist, we released a new album, this is a new event coming up, or some news in the music industry, or everything in between?
A big push that we are going for right now in terms of relevance and connecting listeners to music is actually looking at what kinds of cultural events and cultural moments are going on right now, what's trending, and sometimes those things have little to no relation to music, but we look for ways that we can create that connection. So that happens most often on Twitter, because Twitter is the channel where we're posting, sometimes 8 times a day, whereas Instagram and Facebook are more of a 1-a-day kind of platform. So we're trying out different kinds of content there, and then across each of our more, 1 per day kind of channels, we're looking at kind of what's that most important big anchor piece of content for the day. And that can be anything from an interview that we did with an artist at a show that we did, or at a festival concert that we sponsored, to some editorial content that's built internally by our musicologist team. We have a team of folks here who are kind of the spot where the music comes in, and they make sure that everything goes into the right genre stations, and they help curate our collection. And so these folks, many of them are also very skilled editorially and have great stories about themselves and music as well. So we create some content with them where we ask them to write blog posts or make short videos. So some stuff is internally editorial, and then another portion of our content is coming directly from the artists through the relationships that we have with our artists. And then yet another kind of other portion is connecting through some form of tweet or image, kind of these cultural moments to music. I know that's very broad, but
and you have to be broad, but the basic message is you want to connect to the musically inclined community, and that's the overall big goal: increasing the user base and the fan base. And talking about the fan base, like Facebook's ever evolving algorithm of organic reach. So I want to talk to you about a little bit about that. So nowadays, the biggest peak point for brands is that it doesn't matter how many fans or followers you have. It's very hard to reach them organically unless you do paid advertising. How do you feel about that? And what steps has Pandora taken to reach their fans either organically, or have you moved towards more paid posts?
We've definitely moved towards a paid model, and this has happened very quickly in just the past year or so. Seen a huge shift. I think I'd been hearing about what you were talking about for a very long time, but I had not seen the effects of it until recently. We have 6.8 million fans on Facebook, and we're not really reaching 6.8 million fans. So in order to leverage that, we really do have to pay. And so we have not yet really changed our strategy of 1 post or so per day on Facebook, but we are definitely thinking a lot harder about which of these posts are the ones that we're going to put paid behind. And most often, it's what we feel strongest about. It's what was our strongest performing content on the organic side that we want to amp up with some paid.
And also on other channels, whatever content performs best on other channels, I'm assuming you take that as well into the strategy that, this might perform better if you did paid on Facebook through that as well.
That's right. And then we do have some specific campaigns that we put paid against as well, like when we are partnering with a larger tier artist, or when we're putting on a large showcase and we want to gather RSVPs, we can put paid against the area that we're looking for attendees in.
So in terms of paid, I have 2 questions. One is what kind of paid Facebook in particular advertising you've seen has worked well? Is it sponsored posts, or is it different kinds of ad strategies, placements? What has worked the best for you?
The best for us has been video. Okay. And we mostly do sponsored posts. We have done some hidden, paid posts, but across the board, I would say that the videos are the ones that get the most engagement. I think if you had asked me this just a few months ago, I would have said link posts, but that is no longer true. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said photo posts.
Organic. Okay, photo posts. Okay.
Constantly changing, but right now we're looking
Video.
as much video as we can.
So now, are you leveraging native Facebook video, or are you just linking the video from the original and then sponsoring
We're
that?
doing definitely organic videos inside of Facebook. Absolutely. We do not see great performance from links to videos.
Yeah, so native video, you host the video, like upload the video on Facebook.
In fact, I think that's true across channels. We want to make as much of our content live within the specific channel and the least amount of linking off. And if we do link off, we want to be linking back to Pandora, because ultimately, as we discussed earlier, growing users is our end goal.
Number one priority. Yeah. So now, have you also tried in-app, like not in-app purchase, but sponsored posts with a goal specific to more app downloads? Like, you can set goals when you set up campaigns on Facebook. So have you set up campaigns where the primary goal is more app downloads?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm probably not the best one to speak to that. We have actually a team underneath our marketing team. We have our growth and retention side, and then we have our brand side. And so the social media team and digital team that I live on is actually on our brand side. Okay. So while I say that our ultimate goal is adding users and listeners, that's not exactly true, because that's not exactly what we're always measured against. The growth and retention team is always measured against strict metrics around adding users. And so every time that they try a paid post anywhere in digital, it's going to directly be judged against how many people came in and whether they will do it again. So they're doing a lot of different kinds of ads that are hidden from our feed, but that if you follow Pandora, if you look for Pandora on Twitter, you may see some sponsored posts that don't completely match the tone of our Pandora Radio Twitter handle, and that's coming from our direct marketing growth and retention team. But it is, since I'm mentioning it, that is one of our big initiatives right now is getting more aligned with our growth and retention team to make sure that direct marketing side and the brand marketing side match up wherever possible, and that they're using some of our content in their posts.
So what does the brand marketing team has to prove for ROI? What do you guys have to prove?
So shifts, this is very broad and it's very harder to measure, but shifts in perception, we're measured against growing our own accounts. So we want to make sure that we're adding followers on Instagram and adding followers on Twitter, so that our kind of share of voice is as large or larger than our competitors. So we're looking for continued relevance. And I would say that, I think the social media side is one of the most kind of competitive areas in marketing, because there's so many changes so quickly, as you know.
Absolutely.
And, one example of this is that we are, going to be kind of changing our strategy again, because we want to be using more moving images. So, GIFs, whatever you want to, pronunciation you want to use. And we see so much more engagement around moving pictures in social than static, dry pictures and colorful, beautiful pictures that come from our, brand photographer who goes out and takes photos of bands that come through the office and bands at festivals, and that takes pictures around Oakland, pictures that are meaningful and look nice, as opposed to more corporate looking kind of graphics.
So your team essentially is responsible for like engagement rather than the user base. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So interesting. So with Facebook advertising and Twitter advertising, I'm not sure if your team is supposed to do that, but which one is performing better than, or is there one performing better than the other in your opinion?
It really depends on what kind of content we're putting out there. Honestly, we've seen in different programs, we've seen success on different channels, and sometimes it does feel a bit random, but either channel can be successful depending on what your end goal is.
So you don't have a strong preference of one has always performed up to the expectation versus the other, or both do equally well, but it just depends on the kind of post?
It really does depend.
Okay.
I would say, for Twitter, for us, being one of our first channels and going back to what I originally said about, Pandora coming up as a one-on-one conversation with listeners,
Yeah.
Twitter is a place where we get a lot of engagement and we get a lot of conversation happening that we don't get on other channels, which was in a lot of ways kind of the original intention of social media, is bring everyone into the conversation. And so the kinds of content that we, ideally will be putting on Twitter is content that will kind of foster that conversation, because we do have a team which is a subset of our current listener support team. Now there's about 50 people. Remember I told you there were 5 people when I started. There's a subset of 7 of these folks who act as our community managers on Twitter. And they're responding to sometimes up to 20% of the people that tag us on Twitter. And their intention is not to provide one-on-one support in a it's broken, let me fix it kind of way, but more to have conversations about music with their listeners and to spur more listening by helping give recommendations, inspire people to keep on listening.
So if you would say, so what's the typical ad spend look like for you, for Pandora?
I can't directly speak to that right now, and it's constantly shifting.
Okay. Besides Facebook and Twitter, do you try paid advertising on Instagram and Pinterest, and have you tried it on other social channels as well?
We have not yet, but we will be.
Okay. Speaking of Periscope, changing landscape, it's the most mid-cut and Periscope. Have you leveraged that yet, or how are you using that in your strategy?
Yeah, we have. It's definitely great for live events. And it connects directly through Twitter, so it's another way of engaging folks on Twitter. We do have, as I mentioned, a lot of concert events that Pandora puts on or partners with, and those are great opportunities to really directly connect listeners and artists through an app like Periscope or like Meerkat. We're always a little mindful that we don't want to have a lot of music in the background. We're not able to always have the rights to stream, directly from performances through these apps. So the kinds of content that we think about getting with artists through these platforms are more kind of behind the scenes and kind of interview-esque or quick shout outs.
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. So I was going to ask you, you can't stream live events because that defeats the purpose of attending a live event. So do you use it for like behind the scenes or, a quick look at what's going on?
So any opportunity we can get to get some fun additional content with artists, we go.
It's interesting. I just interviewed the senior VP of marketing for digital media of Playboy, and she was mentioning how they, use it for like their mansion parties and things like that, and they use Periscope to just show a brief of, a taste of what the party looks like, or what the kind of fun that they're having. But obviously they can't stream the whole thing. But yeah, it's interesting how brands are using these live channels to give a taste of what to expect.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I think originally when we started having events, we always talked about how do we make these events into national events. And social media is definitely an opportunity to do that, but I think everyone's still figuring out how to do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, as compared to TV or taking it national, like you said, social media is such an easy and more easily accessible to, get really in touch with the users and get a one-on-one feedback almost instantaneously to see what they're liking. Like Periscope, you can do hearts on it and things like that. So instantaneously, users and viewers, that connection with them is incredible with social media these days.
And again, going back, that's why Snapchat's been really important to us, as we're having more events. Snapchat has proven to be a great platform for kind of showcasing the full span of the event, from pre-party prep all the way through to after party, and kind of seeing the full span of something backstage. And it's also a great app because it's a little bit more forgiving than an Instagram or a Facebook, where you kind of have one shot to show everything in one great visual. You can kind of tell a story through Snapchat. So it has been really helpful for us at events.
I see. Cool. So this has been great, Aaron. I want to ask you, what do you see as the trend, like in the next 5 years in the music industry, especially in the social media landscape?
That's really interesting. Well, I think with the music industry and social media both kind of shifting, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of things to happen. I think one thing that I always think about is how kind of the editorial spaces for music, which have traditionally been magazines or something in print, like a Rolling Stone or Spin magazine, the things that I grew up reading are kind of forcing themselves into a social kind of format, which is interesting to watch happen. And I think there are times when they get it right and times when they don't get it right. Even, MTV and all of the different places where people are used to discovering music are moving online more and more and more, moving into social media. And so as that's happening, I think the things that we just talked about, like Snapchat and Periscope and, all of the different opportunities to directly connect artists and their fan base are becoming increasingly important. And so I feel very, lucky and honored to be in a position where, we're working on this.
Yes, absolutely excited.
There's a lot
I'm as excited as you are to be in this leading in the social media space. It's so exciting, and who knows where 5 years next, will take us. So thank you, Aaron, for being with us on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye now.